Meher is a quiet and deeply observant woman in her mid-20s. She spends most of her time surrounded by data files and forgotten stories, working as a digital archivist in a dusty office tucked away in the back of a city library. Her life is organized, predictable, and ruled by routines. Every detail in her world has its place, from the color-coded folders on her desk to the carefully scheduled tea breaks she takes alone in the staff lounge. People at work see her as distant, maybe even cold. But those who really watch her know that behind her silence there is a sharp mind that misses nothing. Meher listens more than she speaks. She notices things others overlook: a faint tremor in a colleague's hand, a file placed out of order, a name mentioned too casually. Her memory is photographic, her thinking methodical, her nature withdrawn, not because she dislikes people, but because she has learned that silence often reveals more than noise. She trusts logic more than emotions and facts more than assumptions. Having grown up in a foster care system with no clear memory of her early childhood, she has learned to build her life on certainty. But despite the walls she has built around her heart, there is a longing inside her, one that even she rarely admits, a need to know where she truly came from, and why shadows from her past keep slipping into her present. For now, she hides this beneath layers of routine and logic until the accidents begin to happen again and again, shaking the ground beneath her quiet world, making her question if everything she has built her life on is as stable as she thought. And Meher begins to realize that even the most meticulous plans can unravel when truth starts knocking on the door. It was a quiet afternoon when Meher was returning home after finishing her shift. The road was busy as usual, but that day she seemed more lost in thought than ever. Her eyes were on the road, but her mind was somewhere else. A moment's delay, and a speeding car hit her vehicle from the right side. There was a loud crash. The windows shattered into countless pieces of glass, and Meher's head dropped forward onto the steering wheel. For a few seconds, everything felt blurry. Her breathing was rapid, her heartbeat was out of rhythm, and her body felt numb. Then suddenly, she heard a stranger's voice. "Madam, are you okay?" Meher opened her eyes and saw a crowd gathering around the car. A young man was trying to open the door. She stepped out with difficulty. Her body had a few minor scratches, but the deepest injury was the silent fear now frozen inside her. This was her third accident this year. The first one happened when her brakes suddenly stopped working. The second was when she fainted and fell down the stairs. And now, this car crash, another coincidence perhaps. But something inside her whispered, how could so many accidents happen in just 1 year? Were these truly accidents, or was something else going on? She looked around. Every face seemed unfamiliar, but one face, there was something oddly familiar about it. That moment didn't feel ordinary. Quietly, Meher took out her phone and made a note: date, time and location. She knew she had to start keeping a record of all these events, because her instincts were telling her this was no longer a series of random accidents. After the accident, Meher acted like everything was normal. She went to work as usual, buried herself in files, and silently endured it all. But deep inside, something felt off. Her mind kept drifting back to the previous accidents, yet she kept brushing the thoughts away, convincing herself that maybe she was just overthinking. One evening, while having coffee with her close friend Anissa, something was said that shook Meher's thoughts to the core. Anissa looked at her seriously and said, "You do realize this was your third accident this year, and each time you somehow survived. How many times can someone nearly die by coincidence?" Meher shrugged instinctively and gave a small smile, pretending not to take it seriously. But inside her, a chill spread. That one sentence awakened a question she had been avoiding, even in her own thoughts. Were these really just accidents, or was some unseen force playing a hidden game in her life? After Anissa's words, for the first time, Meher began to look at all the incidents together. Every accident she had ignored until now started to feel like part of a pattern, a sequence that didn't seem so random anymore. In that moment, she made a quiet decision. She would start keeping a record of every strange thing that happened: dates, times, details, everything, because deep down, she knew the time had come to stop pretending and start asking questions. The path to the truth had quietly opened in front of her, and she couldn't ignore it any longer. Meher had always been a logical and organized person. She believed in facts over emotions and lived her life with structure and control. But when the accidents kept happening, one after another, her mind refused to see them as mere coincidences. At first, she dismissed everything as bad luck, a twist of fate. But after her friend questioned how many times someone could nearly die by chance, something inside her shifted. She stopped comforting herself with the idea that everything was normal. She pulled out all her old medical records, filed police reports, and began writing down every incident in a diary, the date, time, location, and who was nearby. She even created a separate folder on her phone, where she started saving pictures, videos, and detailed notes. Her daily routine now turned into a quiet investigation. After work, she would spend hours trying to connect the dots, drawing maps on paper to track where each accident occurred and who she had interacted with around that time. What shocked her was that certain faces kept appearing repeatedly, people she hadn't paid much attention to before. She realized that if she truly wanted to find the truth, she had to keep a detailed record of everything. The accidents, which once seemed like nothing more than misfortune, now felt like part of a darker conspiracy, and she knew deep down that the time had come to face her past, because something was hidden, and it was slowly pushing its way to the surface. When Meher began revisiting all the incidents, one by one, the memories of those moments she had once dismissed as mere bad luck came flooding back. The first thing she remembered was the night there was a sudden gas leak in her flat. She had jolted awake from her sleep, only because she smelled something burning from the kitchen. If she had slept just 5 more minutes, she might not be alive today. Then she recalled the hotel, where she had attended a conference. During the event, a large chandelier fell from the ceiling, right where she had been sitting. She had gotten up for a glass of water just moments before. The chandelier crashed onto the floor with a loud bang that echoed through the entire hall. Everyone called it an accident, but now, it didn't feel so random to her. The third incident was even more strange. One day, the elevator at her office stopped midway and suddenly dropped a few feet before the emergency brakes kicked in. She was alone inside. Had the brakes failed completely, she could have been seriously injured or worse. Later, it was revealed that someone had tampered with the cables, but no one was caught, and no explanation was given. When she put all 3 events together in her mind, she felt something unsettling, as if these weren't just separate incidents, but part of a carefully laid out plan, as if someone was brushing her up against death again and again, trying to push her towards some bigger truth. She now knew that calling these accidents was nothing more than lying to herself. The time had come to seek the truth, and there was no turning back. When Meher gathered all the details of the incidents, she began listing the exact dates, locations, and names of people who were around her during those times. She reviewed her notes repeatedly, looked up the locations on Google Maps, and tried to obtain copies of any CCTV footage that was available. Her mind had now started working like that of a detective, analyzing even the smallest detail with intense focus. Soon, she discovered something shocking. All the accidents she had considered separate and unrelated were in fact somehow connected. At each location, there was a familiar face that appeared more than once, or there was a particular person she had interacted with shortly before something unusual happened. She was stunned to realize that every single accident could have been avoided if proper care had been taken. At every place, there had been a small mistake, something minor, that spiraled into something dangerous. But then the question haunted her: why were these minor mistakes happening again and again in her life? When she wrote all the dates down on a single sheet and drew circles around each event, she noticed a strange pattern. Every accident occurred after a specific interval, in different places, but the rhythm was the same. Now Meher was sure that there was a hidden purpose behind all these events. These weren't isolated accidents, they were connected. And perhaps, someone was orchestrating them all from behind the scenes, carefully pulling the strings, without ever being seen. After the third accident, when Meher began inspecting her car, something caught her off guard, a half-burnt photograph, lying on the back seat. Part of it had turned to ash, but what remained was enough to send a chill down her spine. The photo showed an old house, one she recognized instantly. It was her childhood home, the very place where she had lived until the age of 5, and the one she had left behind forever after a mysterious incident. Meher picked up the photograph. Burnt edges and clinging ash suggested someone had intentionally set it on fire and left it there. Her heartbeat quickened, and her breathing turned uneven. She quickly took a picture of it with her phone, and once home, spent hours analyzing every detail. She couldn't remember when the picture was taken, or how it ended up in her car, but one thing was certain: this was no coincidence. That photograph represented a piece of her life she had buried long ago. Now, her past had returned, rising from the ashes like a warning, like a memory that refused to stay forgotten. In that single moment, Meher felt as though someone was trying to show her something, as if the photograph was a message, a sign that the time had come to confront what had long been hidden. She needed to understand why that part of her childhood had been erased, and why it was suddenly coming back now. Meher was deeply involved in her investigation, spending every day trying to uncover new connections and make sense of her growing suspicions. That's when a stranger entered her life, a man named Rahil. He had a calm, composed presence and an unusual aura that made him feel different from the moment they met. He approached her near a cafe, close to her office, and gently introduced himself, saying he was researching predictive patterns in human behavior and accidents. Meher was taken aback, because what he said was directly related to her own search. Rahil explained that most people tend to dismiss accidents as mere coincidences, but when unusual incidents keep happening around a person, they might not be acts of fate, they could be part of something planned. At first, Meher found his words strange, even unsettling, but as he went into more detail and shared a few examples, her curiosity grew. He told her that he was collecting data on these patterns, and in some cases, had found evidence suggesting that certain accidents weren't accidents at all, they were carefully created conditions set by human hands. There was a silence in Rahil's eyes, like he knew much more than he was saying. He told Meher that her feelings weren't wrong, and if she wanted, he could help her. But the journey wouldn't be easy, because what she was looking for would lead her to the truth, and truth never stays silent for long. Rahil looked at Meher intently, as if he could read the fear hiding inside her. His voice was soft, but every word carried a strange weight. He told her that what she was witnessing wasn't just a series of coincidences, someone was behind it, carefully orchestrating each event. And the most terrifying part was that the person responsible was someone very close to her. Meher stared at Rahil in disbelief, struggling to understand what he meant. Could it really be possible that someone she trusted, someone who appeared to be a part of her everyday life, was secretly manipulating her world from the shadows? Rahil explained that even the smallest accidents, the ones she thought were harmless, were actually carefully crafted events, designed to push her towards something bigger, something hidden. A chill ran through Meher. She began picturing the faces of the people closest to her. Anisa, her best friend, who had always been by her side, her office manager, who had shown concern and sympathy after every incident, or the neighbor who always came home late at night and never talked much. Could it be one of them? Rahil warned her that the truth isn't always visible. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones we suspect the least, and that's exactly what makes them dangerous. He told her it was time to uncover not just the pattern behind these events, but the real identity of the person hiding behind a friendly mask, someone with intentions far darker than she had ever imagined. Meher didn't fully trust Rahil. Deep down, she wanted to believe that everything happening was just her imagination. How could she trust a stranger who had suddenly appeared in her life and was calling every accident a part of some grand conspiracy? She told Rahil that she wouldn't believe anything without proof. Without saying a word, Rahil opened his laptop and played a video file he had acquired through discreet sources. It was CCTV footage from the corridor outside Meher's apartment. Meher's eyes widened as the video played. She saw herself leaving her apartment, the door closing behind her, and then a subtle movement caught her eye. At first, it was hard to notice, but then, near one of the walls, a faint shadow moved. It wasn't shaped like a person, not clearly, but something was there. It drifted slowly, almost deliberately, deeper into the apartment. Meher's breath caught in her throat. She watched the clip over and over, and with each viewing, the shadow seemed clearer, more real. Her hands turned cold, her heart started racing. This was her apartment, the one place she thought she was truly safe. But now, she realized, she might never have been alone at all. Rahil told her, this was only the beginning. What she had just seen was proof that someone was watching her, tracking her every move. And if this was happening in her most private space, it meant the danger was far closer than she ever imagined. Now the choice was in Meher's hands. Would she step back into the comfort of denial, or would she gather her courage and walk the path toward the truth, no matter how terrifying it might be? Rahil and Meher began uncovering the hidden corners of her life, parts that had been locked away for years. Meher knew she had been adopted at the age of 5, but everything before that was a complete blank. No photographs, no documents, no memories, just a faint sense that something was hidden, something she needed to know. Rahil started going through the adoption records from the time she was taken in, but the files only held the most basic information: her name, date of birth, and the names of her adoptive parents. Everything else seemed to have been deliberately removed. They searched through orphanage registers and old hospital records, but there was no clear trace of Meher anywhere. As the search deepened, an uneasy feeling began growing inside Meher. It felt as if she was getting close to a part of her identity she had never known existed. Each day brought a new question, and behind every answer, there seemed to be another hidden layer. She was shocked to realize how an entire 5-year portion of a child's life could vanish as if she had never existed. Rahil explained that sometimes identities are erased or hidden, either for protection or to cover up something far more dangerous. Meher began to sense that her past wasn't just missing, it was buried on purpose. And now, that past was starting to resurface, not just as a mystery, but possibly as the very root of all the accidents and strange events that had been haunting her. When Meher began analyzing the dates of her accidents during her search into the past, she discovered something that shook her to the core. The dates weren't random, each one aligned perfectly with a moment from the childhood she had lost, moments she had no memory of, but that were secretly shaping her present. The first accident, where her car brakes suddenly failed, had occurred on the exact day she was first registered at the orphanage. The second accident, when she fell down the stairs and was briefly unconscious, happened on the same date a witness had last given a statement about her biological parents. And the third accident, the most mysterious one, coincided exactly with the date her adoption was legally finalized. It couldn't be a coincidence. Each incident was connected to a specific moment tied to her missing identity. When Meher saw this pattern clearly, her heart dropped. She had never imagined time itself could hold such deep meaning in the events of her life. Rahil told her someone out there knew these dates, someone who had access to her most hidden history, and they were choosing those specific days to trigger something inside her. Maybe to reopen old wounds, maybe to deliver a message that her past wasn't dead, that it was coming back. Now Meher knew she couldn't run from this anymore. She wasn't just being haunted by accidents, she was being chased by forgotten truth, and it was no longer buried. It was alive, breathing, and waiting for her to face it. Meher and Rahil had now started meeting regularly. Each day brought new revelations and silent truths between them. Rahil spoke cautiously, as if there were still things he wasn't ready to say. But one evening, while they were going through an old file together, he finally revealed a truth that made Meher's breath catch. In a quiet voice, he said, "Meher, I've known you since we were children." Meher looked at him, stunned. There was a stillness in Rahil's eyes, the kind that only comes before revealing something deeply buried. He told her that both of them had been in a secret institution as children, one that didn't officially exist in government records, a place where experiments were conducted on children. Meher couldn't believe what she was hearing. She asked him how that was even possible. Rahil explained that the children were chosen based on certain mental and emotional traits. They were subjected to psychological and scientific experiments designed to control memory or observe emotional reactions under specific conditions. Tears welled up in Meher's eyes. She couldn't remember that time, but a strange ache surfaced deep within her, like a wound reopening after years. Rahil said their memories had been wiped, and they had been given new identities, placed into ordinary lives as if nothing had ever happened. Now, everything began to make sense for Meher. The face she kept seeing in dreams, the strange familiarity she felt after every accident, the unexplainable emotions. They were fragments of the truth, and finally they were starting to come together. The silence of the past was breaking, and the truth was ready to be heard. Zoya was Meher's closest friend. She was always there after every accident, comforting her, taking care of her, and doing everything she could to help Meher return to a normal life. Meher had never doubted her, because Zoya was the one person she felt safe confiding in. But when Rahil showed her some old files and secret lists from the organization, one name froze Meher in her tracks. Zoya's name was on that list. Rahil explained that Zoya had been connected to the organization for years, and was one of the select few assigned specifically to monitor Meher. Meher's heart broke. The person she believed was her truest friend turned out to be a shadow quietly observing her life. She couldn't stop wondering, was every comforting word, every caring gesture, every moment spent together just part of a mission? But Meher was torn, because Zoya had never harmed her. In fact, she had always helped. Could it be possible that despite her ties to the organization, Zoya had come to truly care for her? Or was that too just part of a bigger game? Rahil said that often those sent to observe end up forming emotional attachments over time, and some even try to break free from the system. But those who do often pay a heavy price. Now Meher stood at a crossroads. Should she forgive Zoya, or confront her and demand the full truth? Because when betrayal comes from someone you love, the pain cuts even deeper. When Meher began questioning Zoya in a firm and demanding tone, Zoya grew visibly nervous. She tried to deflect, to hide the truth, but Meher's eyes were filled with questions carrying years of buried pain. Eventually, Zoya sat down in silence, guilt written all over her face. Her eyes welled with tears, and in a low voice, she finally spoke the truth. She admitted that Meher's past wasn't like that of an ordinary child. Meher had been part of a secret experimental program, designed to erase memories and gain psychological control over selected children. The program was a joint effort between government officials and private organizations, hidden far from public knowledge. At the age of 5, Meher had been placed into the facility where experiments were conducted on her mind. Her early memories were completely wiped, and afterward, she was given a new identity, and released into normal life as if nothing had ever happened. Zoya explained that the accidents Meher had been experiencing weren't really accidents at all. They were carefully engineered mental triggers. Each one was intended to shock her subconscious, to jolt hidden memories back to the surface. Bit by bit, those buried fragments were being awakened. She also revealed that while her initial role was purely professional, assigned to monitor and report, over time, her feelings changed. Zoya no longer saw Meher as a target. She had come to see her as a sister, someone she genuinely cared about. Tears streamed down Meher's face. The truth was harsh, almost unbearable, but now she finally understood. Every pain, every strange event in her life had meaning. It was all part of a larger plan, a dark conspiracy, designed to bring her back to the truth she was never meant to remember. As Meher got closer to uncovering her past, and the layers of secrets began unfolding one by one, the people who wanted to keep the truth buried grew restless. Rahil had already warned her that a time would come when they would try to end everything, and that time had now arrived. A strange silence began to surround Meher. Her phone would frequently stop working. Unfamiliar eyes followed her at the office, and Zoya suddenly disappeared without a trace. When Rahil used a few trackers to analyze the situation, he uncovered a terrifying truth. He told Meher that a final, carefully orchestrated accident was being planned. This time, it wasn't meant to scare her or trigger memories, it was meant to erase her permanently. The location had already been chosen, a remote deserted mountain road, where there would be no surveillance, no witnesses, and even screams would be swallowed by the silence. Meher now realized she was at the center of a deadly game, and her own life was the ultimate target. But instead of giving up, she joined forces with Rahil to create a counter-plan, one that would turn the trap against those who set it. She knew this would be the biggest fight of her life, not just for her identity, but for her very existence. Because the people who wanted to eliminate her weren't just silencing a person, they were trying to erase a witness. But Meher was no longer silent, she was ready to fight. She had learned that the truth has a price, but she was finally willing to pay it. Meher and Rahil now knew that time was running out, and their enemies were powerful, but they were no longer powerless. Meher had flashes of her past returning through dreams and accidents, and Rahil had the technology to connect all the scattered pieces together. They collected CCTV footage from the locations where Meher's accidents had occurred. In those videos, a few familiar faces kept appearing, among them, one man who turned out to be the mastermind behind the secret program. Rahil decoded the recordings, enhancing the audio to reveal the actual conversations that had taken place behind the scenes. Meanwhile, Meher discovered an old box in the basement of her childhood home. Inside were a few cassette tapes, and a worn-out audio recorder. Rahil converted the tapes into digital format, and to their shock, they found a recorded meeting, conversations between the planners of the experimental program, clearly discussing their agenda and intentions. That was the turning point. Meher and Rahil decided it was time to flip the game. They uploaded the recordings and video evidence onto a secure server, and made plans to broadcast it from a location that couldn't be traced or shut down. They set a trap, one that would catch the very people who had tried to erase Meher's life. Now they had the truth, they had the proof, and they had the courage. They were no longer running. They were ready not just to speak, but to make those responsible finally answer for everything. After escaping the fire, Meher's body was injured. Her arm had a deep wound, her face was marked with smoke and ash, but her eyes no longer held fear. Instead they carried the light only seen in those who have stood face to face with the truth. She was scarred, yes, but stronger than ever before. Even during her treatment at the hospital, she didn't waste a single moment. With Rahil's help, she sent the remaining files to the media and law enforcement agencies. As soon as the videos and audio recordings went public, a storm erupted across the country. People were shocked to learn about the secret program and its inhuman practices. Meher stood in court and gave her full testimony. She didn't flinch for a second. She spoke every truth in detail, bringing every hidden darkness of her life into the light. Her testimony exposed powerful names, people who had for years hidden behind influence and status, while manipulating children's futures. Her words shook the very foundation of the corrupt system. Those who once seemed untouchable were now standing in court, answering for their crimes. Meher had broken her silence. She became a voice that had been silenced for years. She was no longer just a victim, she was a witness, a bearer of truth. Though her soul bore wounds, they were no longer her weakness, they had become her strength. And that strength was now guiding her toward a new life, one where the result of speaking the truth wasn't fear, but freedom. In the final scene, Meher stands at the same deserted train station, where her story began, the same empty bench, the same silence, the same stillness. But this time, Meher is different. There's no confusion or fear on her face, her eyes hold calm, a quiet sense of victory. In one hand, she holds the same burnt photograph she found after the third accident. In the other, the same USB drive, whose meaning once puzzled her. But now, she knows exactly what both contain. The photo was a door to her past. The USB held proof of the conspiracy against her. They're no longer just mysterious objects, they're her strength now, symbols of everything she's survived and uncovered. A distant train whistle echoes. Meher smiles gently, as if welcoming life from a new perspective. She's no longer running from the past, nor afraid of the future. She now knows everything, why her identity was hidden, how her memory was erased, and who tried to use her like a pawn in a much bigger game. But she is no longer the same Meher, who once stayed silent. She is the guardian of truth, the rightful owner of her past. In that final moment, as the camera slowly pulls away from her face, she speaks just one line, "Now I know everything, and I will never stay silent again." As the final scene slowly pulls away from Meher's face, her voice plays softly in the background. It's no longer weak or afraid, it's steady, calm, and filled with resolve. Her voice says, "Accidents are random, but if they keep happening, someone's making them happen." These words capture the entire journey she has been through, the story of a girl who once knew nothing about her past, who accepted every strange event as fate, who endured in silence, but over time, she learned that silence doesn't hide the truth, and closing your eyes doesn't stop the people working in shadows. She began asking questions, searching for answers, enduring pain, doubting others, learning to trust herself, and slowly, piece by piece, she exposed every hidden truth. Her words are not just a reflection, they are a declaration. She didn't just survive, she proved it. She proved that the events that once seemed like coincidences were actually part of a bigger plan. This sentence is no longer just a thought, it's a truth backed by evidence. And that truth didn't just change her life, it exposed the faces behind the masks. There is now a ring of certainty in Meher's voice, a quiet scream that is no longer silent, but a powerful testimony to a truth the world has now heard, and one that can never be buried again.